The day I first met my friend's mom, I didn't expect much, just another visit, another polite hello. But the moment I stepped into the warm, sunlit kitchen, something shifted. She was there, effortlessly moving around, the hum of activity around her somehow fading into the background. She was laughing, not at anything particularly funny, but with a kind of joy that filled the space and immediately pulled my attention. She looked up at me, her eyes catching the sunlight streaming through the window. There was a confidence in her gaze that made it impossible to look away. "You call me old?" she said, the words teasing but soft, like a gentle challenge. Her lips curved into a smile that was both inviting and slightly mischievous. "I'll show you young again." Her voice was warm, with a hint of amusement, and it carried a rhythm that made my chest tighten slightly, though I couldn't tell if it was nerves, curiosity, or something entirely new. As she moved closer to the counter, I noticed the subtle sway of her posture, the way her shoulders relaxed but remained poised, the kind of grace that comes naturally and effortlessly. A few strands of hair fell over her shoulder, catching the light, and I found myself oddly captivated by this simple movement. We talked briefly about my friend, about the project I'd been helping him with, the usual small talk, but there was an undercurrent I couldn't ignore. Her laughter rang out again, and this time it felt like it brushed against me in a physical way, as if her presence alone had a weight, a warmth. When she leaned forward to point out something on the counter, her hand brushed mine. It was quick, fleeting, almost accidental, yet it sent a quiet shock through me. The contact was gentle, nonchalant, yet I could feel the pulse of something unspoken, a spark, maybe, or simply the recognition of each other in a way that words couldn't capture. I tried to hide my reaction, focusing on the conversation, but my eyes kept drifting. I noticed the subtle details, the tilt of her head as she smiled, the way her fingers lingered on the edge of the table, the soft hum of her presence that made the room feel warmer. There was humor in her teasing, yes, but also a quiet awareness, a calmness that hinted at experience and wisdom. By the time I left that afternoon, I realized I was already thinking about her in ways I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just admiration, it was curiosity, a sense of being drawn in by someone whose confidence and warmth felt magnetic. There was tension, yes, though subtle, wrapped in playful laughter and fleeting touches. And there was a promise, unspoken but tangible, that this first encounter was just the beginning. Something about her had unsettled me, in the best way possible, leaving me aware of every glance, every brush of her hand, every smile that lingered a second too long. I walked away with a strange mix of anticipation and hesitation. I didn't yet know what the next encounter would bring, but I knew one thing for certain. Meeting her had shifted something inside me, and I couldn't wait, and didn't entirely want, to see what would happen next. A few days after that first encounter, I found myself back at their house. My friend was distracted with some errands, leaving me alone with his mom in the living room. I should have felt awkward. After all, she was still just my friend's mom, but the memory of her laughter and that teasing smile made me feel oddly at ease. She leaned casually against the edge of the kitchen counter, her posture relaxed but undeniably graceful. "So," she began, tilting her head and letting her eyes linger on me just a second longer than necessary. "You really think I'm old?" There was a teasing lilt to her voice that made my stomach tighten in ways I didn't quite expect. I didn't mean it like that," I stammered, trying to sound casual while internally kicking myself for even thinking it. She laughed again, a soft, melodic sound that filled the room like sunlight. "Oh, come on," she said, walking closer, each step measured but effortless. "I think you just need a little demonstration of what young really feels like." Her tone was playful, but there was an intensity under the surface that made me aware of her presence in a wholly new way. She wasn't just teasing me. She was watching me, reading me, pulling at some hidden corner of my attention that I couldn't ignore. Then, almost as if reading my hesitation, she proposed a challenge. "Let's make this interesting," she said, eyes glinting. "If you can beat me at a game, anything, really, I'll consider showing you just how old I really am, or maybe how young I can feel." I laughed nervously, but there was an edge of anticipation that ran through my chest. The game was simple, a board game sprawled on the coffee table, but the energy between us was anything but ordinary. Every glance, every small movement seemed charged with a quiet electricity. She leaned forward to examine my move, her shoulder brushing mine ever so slightly. I caught a whiff of her perfume, subtle, floral, comforting, and felt my pulse quicken. Her fingers, when they hovered over the pieces, were just a whisper away from mine, and I found myself acutely aware of every slight touch. Even the way she rested her elbow on the table seemed intimate, deliberate in a way that made the game feel like a private world just for the two of us. We laughed, we teased, we tried to outweed each other, but what started as playful competition quickly became a dance of subtle touches and shared glances. When she leaned back, her hand brushing mine lightly as she reached for a card, I felt a spark, a fleeting, electric awareness that I could neither name nor resist. By the end of the game, I hadn't just lost, though that was obvious, but I'd also felt a pull toward her I couldn't shake. Her smile as she leaned back, triumphant and amused, was both warm and slightly daring, as if she knew the effect she had on me and enjoyed it quietly. I left that day with my mind buzzing, not just about the game, but about her, the teasing, the subtle touches, the warmth of her presence. The playful challenge had done more than provoke laughter. It had drawn me closer, making me aware of the tension simmering beneath the surface, a tension that neither of us could deny, but neither would name outright. That day, I realized the game wasn't really about winning or losing. It was about the thrill of being near her, the quiet, teasing closeness that left me both excited and nervous, and the sense that our story was only just beginning. After the playful challenge, our interactions took on a quieter rhythm. The teasing still lingered, but there were moments when her laughter softened into something more introspective, something that drew me in differently than before. It was during one of these afternoons, sitting in her sunlit living room while my friend was busy elsewhere, that I began to see another side of her, a side I hadn't expected, but one I couldn't look away from. She was perched on the edge of the sofa, a soft throw draped across her shoulders, her posture relaxed yet elegant. I watched her fingers idly trace the pattern in the fabric, the curve of her nails catching the light. She was speaking quietly about her younger years, sharing memories of adventures and dreams she had once chased, moments tinged with both joy and regret. There was a faint catch in her voice, a subtle vulnerability beneath her usual confident tone. Her eyes met mine for a brief moment, and I felt an unspoken invitation to listen, really listen, not just to her words, but to the weight of them. There was a tenderness in the way she tilted her head, as if seeking understanding, as if my presence mattered more than just polite company. It made my chest tighten, a mix of admiration and an unexpected ache of empathy. When she laughed lightly at one of her own stories, it was softer, warmer, less teasing. I noticed the way her shoulders relaxed, the gentle rise and fall of her chest with each breath, the subtle warmth radiating from her. She brushed a strand of hair from her face, and our fingers touched briefly. So brief, it could have been accidental, but the sensation lingered in a way that neither of us acknowledged aloud. As she spoke, I realized the layers of her personality, the strength, the confidence, the humor, were balanced with moments of quiet fragility. It made her human in a way that was mesmerizing, and I felt an urge to protect, to understand, to be closer, though I didn't yet know how to express it. She paused mid-story, and for a long moment, silence filled the room. It wasn't uncomfortable, it was intimate. I noticed her breathing, steady but faintly uneven, as if revealing just a hint of the emotions she usually kept tucked away. My hand hovered near hers, almost instinctively, but I let it stay, aware that proximity alone was enough for now. When she finally smiled at me, it was gentle, not teasing. There was trust in it, a quiet acknowledgement of the connection forming between us. And in that moment, I realized that this slow unfolding, this teasing turned tender, was what made our relationship so compelling. It wasn't about immediate gratification. It was about discovery, about noticing the subtle shifts in expression, the fleeting touches, the way laughter could hide longing or hesitation. I left that afternoon with a new awareness. She was more than just my friend's mom, more than a playful tease. She was someone with depth, experience, and the quiet vulnerability that made her undeniably magnetic. And I knew, without saying a word, that my feelings were deepening, slowly, intentionally, painfully beautifully, and that every future encounter would carry the weight of that growing intimacy. After the afternoon of shared stories and glimpses into her life, I began noticing her in a different way. More than just my friend's mom, more than just the playful woman who had teased me about being young. There was a subtle tension building between us, unspoken but palpable, and I couldn't ignore it. One evening, I returned to their house to pick up something for my friend, only to find her in the living room, reading quietly. The soft lamplight fell across her face, highlighting the gentle lines around her eyes and the way her hair caught the golden glow. She looked up as I entered, her expression a mixture of surprise and amusement. "You're here again?" she asked, her voice soft but teasing. I nodded, feeling a heat rise in my chest. "Just thought I'd see how you're doing," I said, unsure if my words sounded casual or entirely transparent. She laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that seemed to echo from deep inside her, carrying warmth and a subtle invitation. "Well, since you're here," she said, shifting on the couch, "you might as well stay a while. But don't get too comfortable. You might learn something about me you weren't expecting." Her comment was lighthearted, but the way she angled herself on the sofa, legs slightly turned toward me, a subtle lean that reduced the space between us, made my heart rate pick up without any logical reason. There was a rhythm to her movements, a gentle grace that made proximity feel electric. Each time our eyes met, it was like a quiet conversation, a pause heavy with meaning, where words weren't necessary to feel the pull between us. At one point, she reached for a book across the coffee table, and our hands brushed as we both grasped it. It was accidental, yes, but the contact lingered for just a heartbeat longer than it should have. I felt the warmth of her skin, the softness of her fingers, and the subtle electricity of unspoken desire. I pulled back slightly, aware of the taboo, yet unable to dismiss the way my chest had tightened, the way my pulse had sped up. We talked, but the conversation seemed secondary to the awareness of each other's presence. The casual touches, the shared laughter, the way her gaze occasionally softened when she looked at me, it all built a tension that was at once thrilling and frustrating. I was aware of the age gap, of the societal boundaries, yet my mind refused to separate. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when the unspoken tension between us finally found a physical space to exist. I had dropped by to help with some chores, moving boxes in the garage, fixing a wobbly chair, but somehow, even the mundane task became charged with something more. She was there, supervising with that effortless grace, her hair tied loosely at the nape of her neck, a few strands falling free across her forehead. The sunlight streaming through the windows highlighted the gentle curve of her shoulders, the subtle sway in her stance. "Careful with that one," she said softly as I lifted a box, her hand lightly brushing mine when she reached to steady it. The contact was brief, almost casual, but in that fleeting moment, warmth shot through me. There was no malice, no overt intention, just an innocent touch that somehow felt electric. I could feel her body so close, the faint scent of her perfume mingling with the dusty smell of the garage, creating a memory I knew I wouldn't forget. As we worked side by side, the air between us felt thick with quiet tension. She leaned slightly toward me to reach for a tool, and our elbows bumped. "Oops," she murmured, a faint laugh escaping her lips, but I noticed the softness in her eyes as she glanced up at me. That small gesture, the accidental brush of skin, the fleeting closeness, was charged, teasing, yet completely innocent. It was a delicate balance, the kind of touch that lingers in memory long after it's gone. Later, when we moved into the kitchen to clean up, she asked me to hold something while she reached over, and once again, Our hands met. This time, I didn't pull away immediately. Our fingers lingered together for a heartbeat longer than necessary, a silent acknowledgement of the growing pull between us. The warmth of her skin pressed against mine was oddly grounding, as if our bodies were communicating what words could not. She caught my glance and smiled, the kind of smile that made my chest tighten. There was humor in it, yes, the playful teasing of before, but now there was something deeper, something softer, something that spoke of trust and quiet intimacy. I found myself noticing her in small, lingering ways. The gentle tilt of her head, the sway of her hips as she walked, the warmth of her laughter as it filled the room. Every movement was magnetic, every touch charged with subtle meaning. When we finally paused, standing close in the sunlight that poured through the window, I realized how aware I was of her. Her eyes held mine for just a fraction longer than necessary, and the soft brush of her hand as she adjusted a stray lock of hair against her cheek sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't lustful or overt. It was something quieter, more profound. The thrill of proximity, the unspoken acknowledgement of mutual curiosity and growing affection. I left that day with my thoughts swirling, replaying every fleeting touch, every lingering glance. There was no dramatic confession, no boundary crossed, but the seed of closeness had been planted. In the quiet warmth of that afternoon, I felt it, the undeniable tension that promised more, a slow-burn attraction that neither of us could ignore. The game had shifted. Playful teasing had transformed into something far more compelling, far more real, and I knew the next encounter would carry the weight of this delicate, tantalizing closeness. That night, I found myself lingering longer than I should have. My friend had gone out, leaving the house quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint creak of the wooden floorboards. She was sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, the warm light from inside spilling across her face. I hesitated at first, unsure if I should interrupt her solitude, but something in her posture, a relaxed tilt of her shoulders, the way her gaze lingered on the horizon, made me step closer. "Mind if I join you?" I asked softly, trying to sound casual, though my heart betrayed me with every word. She looked up, a small, knowing smile curving her lips. "Of course," she said, patting the bench beside her. There was no teasing this time, only quiet warmth, a subtle invitation that made me feel like I was crossing a threshold into something private, something precious. We sat in companionable silence at first, the kind of silence that isn't empty but filled with awareness. The evening air was cool, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers from the garden. She handed me a mug of tea, and as our fingers brushed over the handle, the contact lingered just slightly longer than necessary. My chest tightened at the touch, the warmth spreading in a way that had nothing to do with the tea. Then she spoke, her voice low and steady. "You know, sometimes I feel like people only see the confident, playful side of me. But there's more. There's vulnerability, mistakes, regrets, things I don't show to just anyone." Her words surprised me, not because of what she was saying, but because she was saying them to me. The weight behind them, the quiet honesty, pulled me closer emotionally. I shifted slightly, leaning in, my shoulder almost touching hers, and I realized how aware I had become of every subtle movement she made. "I understand that," I replied carefully, feeling a strange mixture of awe and nervousness. "I think I want to understand more, if you let me." She turned her gaze toward me, and there it was, the softness in her eyes, a flicker of something almost fragile, balanced delicately with her usual poise. "I don't often let people in," she admitted, "but there's something different about you. You notice things, small things, gestures, moments, things that matter." Our hands brushed again, this time intentionally, her fingers intertwining with mine for just a moment. The connection was electric but gentle, grounding and exhilarating at the same time. We laughed softly, a shared acknowledgement of the delicate line we were walking, the age gap, the social expectations, the complexity of feelings we both understood but didn't need to name outright. For the first time, we were honest. Honest about curiosity, about attraction, about the quiet longing that had been simmering between us for weeks. And in that honesty, there was intimacy, not physical, not sexual, but a closeness that settled deep in the chest and lingered in the air like a song you can't stop humming. When the night ended, we didn't rush to label anything. There was no dramatic confession, no sudden leap. Just a lingering sense of understanding, a promise that what had begun with playful teasing and fleeting touches was now rooted in trust, awareness, and a quietly mutual desire. As I left the porch, I realized the bond had deepened, and I was certain that our next encounter would carry the weight and warmth of this unspoken, heartfelt connection. The days that followed felt lighter, as if an invisible thread had drawn us closer. There was no urgency, no rush to define what had already begun in playful teasing, fleeting touches, and quiet confessions. Instead, our interactions carried a gentle rhythm, a dance of smiles, glances, and the kind of closeness that made my chest warm in a way I couldn't ignore. It was another Saturday afternoon, and I had stopped by under the pretense of helping with errands. She was in the living room, seated comfortably with a book in her lap, her posture relaxed yet elegant. When she looked up and caught my gaze, a smile curved her lips, the same teasing, warm smile that had first drawn me in weeks ago, now softened by something deeper, more intimate. "Back so soon?" she asked lightly, but there was a warmth in her tone, a quiet acknowledgement of the connection we shared. "I thought I'd see how you're doing," I said, realizing my voice was softer than intended, almost hesitant, as if speaking aloud the affection I felt made it more real. She closed the book and patted the seat beside her. "Well, since you're here, you might as well stay," she said, and the casual invitation carried weight. I sat down, careful not to overstep, but the moment I did, I became acutely aware of her proximity, the subtle warmth of her presence, the faint scent of her perfume, the gentle rhythm of her breathing. We didn't need to fill the silence with words. Just being near her, side by side, was enough. Occasionally, our hands brushed, and each time, a quiet shiver ran through me. When she adjusted a strand of hair from her face, I instinctively reached out, letting my fingers linger near hers. It was a slow, deliberate closeness, gentle and careful, yet profoundly intimate. She leaned back slightly, her shoulder brushing mine, and for a moment, the world seemed to shrink. I could feel her heartbeat, steady and calm, and in that simple, shared space, I understood the depth of what had grown between us. There was trust here, a safe and tender bond that didn't need dramatic declarations or rushed confessions. Her eyes caught mine, sparkling with warmth and a teasing light. "I told you I could show you young again," she murmured, the words playful, yet carrying the weight of shared experiences and unspoken feelings. I laughed softly, my chest full of an emotion I couldn't name. Happiness, admiration, desire, all rolled into one quiet certainty. We remained like that for a long while, side by side, sharing subtle touches, a hand resting on hers, a gentle brush of fingers, a shoulder leaning lightly against mine. It was a closeness that spoke louder than words ever could, a mutual understanding that the connection between us was real, meaningful, and emotionally complete. When I finally stood to leave, there was no awkwardness, no sudden change. She smiled again, warm and reassuring, and I realized that this slow, careful, heartfelt intimacy was exactly the kind of connection I had been longing for. It was fulfilling, YouTube-safe, and quietly romantic in a way that lingered long after the encounter ended. I walked away that evening, heart lighter, mind calm, and a quiet anticipation for the moments we would continue to share. Our story had reached a satisfying, gentle resolution, not through dramatic confessions or overt gestures, but through laughter, trust, subtle touches, and the slow, steady building of affection that only deepened with every glance and every shared moment.